All right. Welcome to another exciting episode uh, of This Week in Space. I'm your host with the most, Joan Emerson Bell. I'm a tarot reader, astrologer, mental health counselor. I like to show up here each and every Monday at 11-ish Mountain Time to give you the breakdown of what's happening this week in space. And I think I'm desensitized and disassociated enough to get this show going. But before I do, I just want to remind folks that God willing, I will be co-facilitating a retreat in Greece with Sarah Janes and some other lovely facilitators. This is on prophetic dreaming. We'll be going to Epidavros, to the sanctuary of Asclepius, the temple to Asclepius, and to Delphi, as well as some other cool and exciting places. This will be May 8th through the 15th. If you are interested, you can check out Sarah Jane's Dreaming on Instagram, and or you can go to the website, themysteries.org, to sign up or get more info. And I will put a link in the show notes and in the comments on Instagram if y'all are interested in that. Also, I do astrology and tarot readings if any of y'all are interested in that to help you navigate these trying and turbulent times because, whew, Lord knows, these are some trying and turbulent times. But you know what? We're all going to get through it together. With that all being said, let's get into this week in space for March the 2nd. That's today through March the 8th. And it's already March, and it feels like 2026 has been going on for several years already. So, whew, this is where we're at. Let's get up into it. Starting off the week, Monday, March the 2nd, we have Mars entering into the mutable water sign of Pisces. So, some good news as Mars leaves Aquarius, it kind of takes the pressure off of the fixed signs. And as it enters the mutable Jupiter ruled sign of Pisces, Mars may mellow out a little bit, which I am looking forward to. There are no outer planets in the mutable signs right now for Mars to activate through square or opposition. And this is nice because Mars really churned things up this past week with the square to Uranus on Friday and its movement over the eclipse point at 28 degrees Aquarius on Saturday. And that's the place where we had that Aquarius solar eclipse on February the 17th. And I talked about this last week, but when Mars moves over a sensitive point in the chart, like an eclipse point, it tends to trigger it. And I think the Mars square Uranus on Friday and Mars moving over that eclipse point early Saturday morning, I think, are both signatures which kind of unfolded into the bombing of Iran over the weekend, which, yeah, pretty dysregulating. And, I think that this has been building for a while, and then the Mars square Uranus, Mars moving over that eclipse point really like activated these things. And Mars is a planet of action, and Uranus can be sudden, unpredictable change. And so with that square, and again, Mars kind of activating the latent energy of the eclipse at 28 degrees of Aquarius, I think that this erupted into violence. And now that Mars has moved into Pisces, things may hopefully chill out a little bit because, man, the hits just keep coming this year. So, Mars is a planet of action and conflict, and Pisces has a lot to do with compassion and connection. And so, this may ease some of the heat that Mars has been generating through the friction of the hard aspect to Uranus last week, and then the conjunction with Pluto at the very end of January. Pisces is a Jupiter ruled sign that is about coming into connection with something larger than the self, is a sign of unification. And in Pisces, this ideal of unification becomes a kind of motivating factor for Mars, which, could go either way, for better or for worse. So in this mutable sign of Pisces, we are asked to consider how our individual emotional experiences is located within the context of collective emotions. How is what I'm feeling related to the ambient emotions that I am existing within? So with Mars here, there's a motivation to act based on what one is feeling, Pisces being a water sign. So it is motivated by feelings. It can be helpful to sort of sort out whether what is moving me to act is my feeling, or is it coming from the larger reservoir of the collective emotional experience. I think it's important to sort out the feelings that are driving us to act. Is it coming out of the collective anxiety of this moment, or out of a shared sense of frustration, or is it an intuitive feeling that is specific to me, which is driving me to take action in the world? And so I think this week, with a bunch of stuff happening in Pisces, these are important questions to sit with. Is this my feeling? What is this feeling? Or am I just picking this up from wandering around in the grocery store and feeling these sort of ambient emotional qualities that everybody else is experiencing? So something to sit with. Moving along to Tuesday, March the 3rd, we have a full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo. This is going down at 12 degrees and 53 arc minutes of that mutable Mercury ruled sign. The full moon occurs at 3:37 a.m. Pacific time, making that 6:37 a.m. on the East Coast. And this Virgo full moon is a total lunar eclipse, which marks the completion of this eclipse season, this eclipse portal. Again, the first one was in Aquarius back on February the 17th, which was the beginning of the Chinese zodiacal year of the fire horse. And it's been pretty full on since then, if you want my humble opinion. And so this is a full moon eclipse, which reveals some of the things that are being harvested, as well as some of the old patterns that may need to be discarded or examined and composted. The last eclipse on February 17th was in Aquarius, which provided a preview of the shifting of the nodal axis into the Leo Aquarius axis. We've been having eclipses in the Virgo Pisces axis for about a year already. So this eclipse may reveal some things that have reached their culmination over the past year or so. This is a South Node eclipse, and the South Node is a release point. It is a place of detachment and the surrendering of attachment and desire. So this is a place of letting go. And we can consider themes around letting go of outdated patterns, habits, and systems. We may want to examine the qualities of the Virgo archetype that may not be serving us on an individual or a collective level during this eclipse. And so this may be letting go of old programming related to criticism, analysis, refinement, or perfectionism. It's important with Virgo to not let perfection be the enemy of good enough, and to consider that it is the things that we perceive as imperfections that actually can create the space for humility and collaboration with others or with the spirit. And Dene weavers, who are renowned for their weaving skill and their rugs, will intentionally leave imperfections in their weaving, because perfection, in their cosmology, perfection belongs to the Great Spirit. And to weave something perfectly says to the divine that I don't need your help anymore. I got this. And so that divine inspiration may leave us if you send the message that, oh, I'm so good that I don't need help, or I don't have any space for improvement or collaboration with the divine. And I think it's really important to stay in collaboration with the divine and to not strive for a sense of perfection that cuts off any of that, the inspiration or collaboration that can come from something greater than ourselves. And so, learning that has really helped me to reconsider ideas of perfection and the importance of leaving space for happy accidents and also collaboration with the genius or the spirit or the divine energies with which help to motivate us and guide us. So Mercury is ruled, or Virgo is ruled by Mercury, who happens to be retrograde and in their fall in Pisces right now, which may make this eclipse a little bit extra confusing. And it may cause us to look within ourselves to observe and address internal systems that need to be revised, reworked, or reconsidered. While Virgo is an earth sign that deals with practical matters and is trying to kind of systematize things so that they run smoothly, the ruler of Virgo, Mercury, is retrograde and in their fall in a water sign. So we may encounter emotional attachments or big feelings connected with systems and pragmatic structures that are revealed during this eclipse. And this may be old survival strategies or beliefs that we have formed emotional attachments to that we have sort of taken to be the truth. And so uprooting these may cause some emotional responses. But remember that Virgo is a sign of the harvest. Its powers of discernment are related to discerning what to harvest, because it will be useful in the future, and what to leave on the tree or what to leave on the ground so it can become compost and support the soil or seed future crops. So during this eclipse, we are asked to reflect on the programs we are running and to practice discernment around if they are functioning to help support us to move towards the future that we want, or if they are keeping us locked in an outdated image of ourselves and the world based on our past experiences. These systems may have been designed during times of difficulty, which were functional at that moment and in those phases, but they may not be relevant to where we find ourselves currently, and they may not be helpful in getting us to where we want to go. Um, so this eclipse is also sextile and trine to Jupiter in Cancer. So Jupiter in Cancer is sextile the moon and trine the sun in Pisces. So Jupiter helps us to see the story arc in the narrative structure that is one's life. And so this can help provide some context and coherence to our current experience and our experience with the eclipse event. And so these supportive aspects from Jupiter, the sextile and the trine, can help us to see the bigger picture and to locate what is arising during these eclipses in our personal and collective mythology. This can help us to observe what is being revealed during this eclipse through the lens of the bigger picture understanding that Jupiter provides, and to see in new ways how the pieces kind of fit together and what may need to be reworked or re-envisioned in order for things to operate in a more functional way, which I think can be really helpful. Then Jupiter will trine the sun later on in the week, and we'll get to that in a minute. So, Wednesday, March the 4th, we have Venus in Pisces, sextile Uranus in Taurus. This is happening at 27 degrees and 49 arc minutes. So, Venus in relationship with Uranus creates a need for novelty and a desire for freedom. So we may be looking for a break from our daily routines during this transit and looking for a bit of excitement to kind of shake things up and to help us to feel a little bit more alive. So we may find this through new and exciting aesthetic experiences or through relationships and interpersonal connections. And One of the ways that you can think about this is like the excitement of a crush and how that sort of shifts the structure of our daily routine as you're like thinking about that person and being like, "Ooh, did they text me back? When are they going to text me? Ooh, I'm gonna send them this meme." This sort of shakes us out of our daily routine. It provides a bit of excitement or a different perspective on what we're experiencing on the day to day. With Venus and Pisces, this also might create some romantic fantasies, which shake us out of the boredom of routine through the daydream or the fantasy. And that sense of excitement and anticipation that these fantasies can generate. And there's nothing wrong with this, but there can be a little bit of caution with dipping into delusion or into fantastical thinking that causes us to either act impulsively or to want to abandon the structures and constraints that we are operating in. So this transit can bring up a desire for excitement, connection, and freedom, all of which are good things. And ideally, this transit provides us with an opportunity to integrate more of those qualities into our daily life moving forward. So Thursday, March the 5th, we have the Sun in Pisces trine Jupiter retrograde in Cancer. This is occurring at 15 degrees and 8 arc minutes of those water signs. And so both the Sun and Jupiter are symbols of coherence, which is good because this week things are feeling extra unhinged. And I think that we could use some cohering principles to help us hold things together as it feels like the world is slipping even further into chaos. So the sun is the cohering factor in the solar system. It is what holds all of the planets in their orbit. Similarly, the sun or the solar ego identity is the cohering factor in the psyche. And it is the internal identity and sense of self that holds all of the kind of psychological parts of oneself in their orbit. And so Jupiter coheres through wisdom and the creation of coherent myth or narrative structure. And I mentioned this earlier when we were talking about Jupiter's trine to the sun during Tuesday's eclipse. So Jupiter is stabilizing. Its stability comes from different parts of the system working together to create a coherent functional structure. We can think about this ideally in societal structures where different systems come together to create a coherent society. Or we can think about this in our internal structure, where different parts of our internal system come together to create a functioning, cohering psyche. And the external systems working together to create a coherent structure, societal structure, appears to be lacking in the world. And while I think it might be ambitious to think about our systems working together at a national level to make anything functional, we can think about how we participate with the system in our local community and family life that can provide support, to think locally, to think internally, how are my systems functioning? How are they working together to support me in what I'm doing? And how can I be engaged in local systems, in family systems, in community systems to create a little bit more coherence and a little bit more ease? Hmm. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, which is a sign that deals with care and how our emotional energy moves us to act in the world. And we can consider the systems of care that we are embedded in and how these systems of care can serve to help us to regulate and can bring a sense of safety and coherence at a time where things feel increasingly unstable. Jupiter also helps us to expand into the world. It helps our inner world to grow in ways that incorporate our experience with the outer world. In this supportive aspect between Jupiter and the Sun, um, uh, our sense of self and ego identity gets ex the Jupiter trine to the sun and that sense of self can help us to expand who we see ourselves to be and how we function in the world to include new material and an expanded awareness of our relationship with the larger world. And Jupiter is related to Zeus in the Greek pantheon. And Zeus is the creative imagination that creates possibilities through the general generative function of our creative and imaginative abilities. So with this trine to the sun, it asks us to have faith both in ourselves and in the world. And I know that might be a big ask right now, but it can provide us with a reminder of our creative ability to affect change. And this change oftentimes begins within the self and can move outward in the world through the imaginative function which seeds our actions and helps us to create a vision for the reality that we want to step into. And this isn't about manifestation, but it's not about sitting there and being like, oh, I'm manifesting this thing. Oh, I'm going to make this thing happen with my mind. But it's important to remember that without a vision for what we want to create, we are kind of at the whim of what is offered to us by our circumstances. So Jupiter reminds us to have faith and to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. And in difficult times, this is incredibly important. One of the ways that control continues to function is through the story that this is all there is and change is impossible, that we must accept the current conditions because they are eternal. Jupiter blows up that story and helps us to construct a new narrative and provides the hope that things can change, as well as the awareness to recognize the good that is present all around us. As we tap into the sense of faith and remember our own creative potential, it helps us to update the solar consciousness that holds that psyche in orbit. If our sense of what could be possible expands, it shifts how we perceive ourselves in relationship to the lives that we are living and the world that we are participating in, as well as the structures that we are operating in. This transit can foster a sense of optimism that I think is really important right now. And it is really valuable to remember that tomorrow can be better than today and to practice accessing the emotional resources that we find available in our daily lives that can help support us as we allow ourselves to imagine a better story for ourselves and for the world that we are living in. With this transit, it's important to remember not to let those in power control the narrative because their narrative is one that glorifies death. So what is it like to tune into a life-based story? What does that look like for you? And can you allow yourself to feel into that and to begin to live that out, that life-based story, living that out in your daily interactions with other people, with the living world, and with yourself? This is the creative, generative power of Jupiter in action. And it can help shift the solar structure that holds that internal world together by having the faith to allow that internal identity to grow into something that feels more nurturing and generative than the harsh story that we are offered by those who seek to repress collective care, personal freedom, and to maintain their power and control. Which brings us to Friday, March the 6th. On Friday, which is Venus's day, we have Venus entering Aries, and Venus will be in Aries until March the 30th. Ooh, and Gina Maria is saying, love infinite possibilities. Exactly. And I too love infinite possibilities. I think it makes the world much more fun to live in, even during difficult times. So, on Venus's day, the planet of love, beauty, relationships, and values leaves their exaltation in Pisces and enters into the Mars-ruled sign of Aries, which is where Venus is in detriment. Aries is too hot and dry and too fast for Venus, who likes the luxury to take it slow and enjoy life without needing to struggle for what feels good. And think about like the hot, dry qualities of Aries, and Venus is like, oh, my skin's all messed up. I need to like moisturize. Hold on 1 second. I can't do that right now. I'm still getting ready. And so Venus has a bit of difficulty in Aries. However, Mars has just entered into Pisces earlier this week, and Venus is the exaltation ruler of Pisces. And so there may be some kind of mutual support between Mars and Venus, at least some mutual understanding. And so it's important to remember that a planet in detriment is under-resourced. So it has a harder time getting its needs met, and it has to become more innovative and resourceful to do what they need to do and to express themselves and to feel the way that they want to feel. So things don't come easily to Venus and Aries. So Venus needs to get creative to find ways to experience joy and connection here. And this can lead to innovation and clever ways of approaching situations, which can end up having lasting benefits. Venus's time in Aries also provides this planet with valuable lessons around being direct, taking risks, self-assertion, and following one's desires. So there may be resistance around these things, especially in the Venusian realms of romance and connection, or putting oneself out there, or expressing creative projects. However, Aries is all about courage. And there can be very important lessons here around summoning the courage to take risks and to put oneself out there to follow the path of desire, which moves us along to Saturday, March the 7th. We have Mercury retrograde in Pisces, conjunct the Sun in Pisces. This is occurring at 16 degrees and 52 arc minutes of the mutable water sign of Pisces. So, Saturday, we have the Mercury cazimi. This is Mercury's retrograde conjunction with the Sun, and it marks the heart of the Mercury retrograde. And if we think about a retrograde as an underworld journey, where we kind of descend into the depths of the internal or unconscious world, where we uncover hidden material that asks for integration, then the cazimi is a moment of clarity in this descent process. As Mercury comes into connection with the sun, something gets illuminated. Hidden information can become revealed for a brief and shining moment, and we can get a glimpse of understanding that can help us to make sense of the path that we are on. As this retrograde occurs in the water sign of Pisces, it may bring to light some emotional information and help us to understand some of the emotional intuitive waters that we are swimming in. It also might help us to recognize how the emotions and feelings we are holding and working with are related to the larger emotional body of the collective. This can help us to sort out what is ours and what is not ours, what we are responsible for and what is the collective nervous system that we are hooked into. And as we work on regulating our own systems and our own nervous system, it helps us to bring ease to the larger emotional body that we are part of, which is important work in times of uncertainty and chaos. So the Mercury cazimi, this conjunction, is also a moment where Mercury enters into the heart of the sun. And Mercury being in their fall, they are protected by the sun. They are in the sun's sort of good graces as Mercury enters into the center of the sun, into the temple of the sun. And and as Mercury does this, they offer all of the information that Mercury has gathered in all their wanderings and meanderings as a sacrifice to the sun, this cohering principle of the psyche. So, this is a moment to clear the slate, as well as a chance to process the information that we have been receiving through all of our sense organs. And I'm not saying this should happen consciously because that's overwhelming, and sort of like sitting down and reading all the unread emails in your inbox. More like this is a time to just allow yourself to sit and take it in for a moment and just allow some space during the cazimi to see what arises from the deep mind. And this is a moment that we can open some space for Mercury to communicate what it's been picking up. and to get a little glimpse of clarity around the retrograde process and what lessons or wisdom might be available to us at this stage of Mercury's underworld journey, and how that might inform the way forward when this phase is done and it's time to move forward again. So, also, Saturday, March the 7th, we have Venus in Aries conjunct Neptune in Aries. And this is occurring at 1 degree and 16 arc minutes. And so shortly after Venus entered Aries, they will meet up with Neptune and then Saturn a day later. So the last time Venus was conjunct Neptune was May the 2nd of 2025 at 1 degree of Aries, so the same degree of Aries. So you might want to think back to what was going on in early May because there may be some echoes with that transit, with that last time that Venus and Neptune were conjunct. So Neptune is a signature of the longing for union with something bigger than oneself. This is the longing for the idealized paradise of Eden, or the return to the womb, or connection with the divine, or connection with undifferentiated consciousness and unity. All great sounding things. With Venus, the planet of love and relationship, we may seek this sense of connection through romantic, intimate, or interpersonal connection to fulfill that sense of longing. However, Neptune can be foggy, confusing, illusory, or downright deceptive. We may find ourselves getting lost in connection or missing red flags, and the desire to merge with somebody else may obfuscate what is actually happening. It's important to honor our longing and desire, but to see if we can kind of like slow down and consider what is actually happening here, and to see if we can trace that thread of desire or longing back to the source and see what information may be available to us as we reach back to the root of desire. Neptune can show up as the savior, redeemer, or the victim and martyr. So uh, with this conjunction with Venus occurring in Aries, there may be the desire to race in and rescue somebody, or the feeling that it's overwhelming, it's too much, I need somebody to rescue me. And you may want to kind of interrogate those feelings before you find yourself falling into either of those roles. And Neptune in Aries makes me think of the story of Don Quixote, which is maybe my favorite novel of all time. And Don Quixote was an old man who read too many romantic novels about chivalry, and they rotted his brain. So he developed the illusion that he was a knight errant, and he sets off on a quest over the countryside to right the wrongs. And so he develops this infatuation with Dulcinea de Toboso, who is this peasant woman from a neighboring village that he kind of creates this idealized fantasy, this image around. And he imagines Dulcinea as a noble lady whom he's pledged to and is performing acts of chivalry in his honor. And so he fabricates this whole image of her and constructs a whole narrative around her that she had no awareness of, and was like, this was definitely not reciprocated and pretty non-consensual. And it created the motivation for him to go on his quest and to right the wrongs of the world. And this is the delusion that Venus conjunct Neptune and Aries can bring, especially in the pioneering sign of Aries that can drive us to action through the fantasy of attraction. So if we're motivated by illusion created from desire, it can drive us to do so. It can drive us into some difficult places where we may find that we are fabricating monsters from windmills and experiencing a lot and expending a lot of energy to prove ourselves to a mirage. So just keep that in mind over the weekend. Also, I just want to bring up, for all Don Quixote's illusion and silliness, he ends up being a hero, and his adventures are still remembered 400 years later. So there is that also. Which brings us to Sunday, March the 8th, with Venus in Aries conjunct Saturn in Aries, and this is occurring at 2 degrees and 38 arc minutes. So, right after Venus conjuncts Neptune, they will conjunct Saturn. And with Venus's conjunction with Saturn, it might provide a rude awakening from the fantasy that Venus had fabricated in the fog and longing of their conjunction with Neptune. Saturn is a planet of reality. And while Neptune may have created a beautiful illusion and a fantastical dream around Venusian themes of love and connection, Saturn says, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Wake up. Saturn is a wake up call and a reality check, which might feel a little harsh on the heels of the kind of blissful Neptunian Venus conjunction. Furthermore, Saturn is a planet of solitude, so it can create some feelings of isolation and loneliness. So we may move through the weekend riding high on this fantasy that we have created in our minds about connection or love or romance, only to have our bubble burst by grumpy old Saturn on Sunday, which might leave us feeling a little bummed out or dejected. However, on the upside of this transit, Saturn is a planet of boundaries. Neptune is unboundaried and is seeking to merge with another and lose oneself through interconnection. But Saturn puts the kibosh on that. After the kind of illusory and unboundaried Neptune Venus conjunction, Saturn helps us to return to ourselves and to our values and our inner alignment and consider ways that we can construct healthy boundaries that can help to support our independence, autonomy, and sense of self. And boundaries are really helpful for Venus. They help Venus to honor their value system and preserve what we like by identifying, naming, and responding to what we don't like. So, with this transit, we may find ourselves withdrawing from social situations and considering themes of responsibility instead of indulgence. Saturn wants to create things that are lasting, so we may observe areas of love and relationship through a much more practical lens than with Venus's conjunction with Neptune, who's just like, we just met, let's get married. So this may not be as much fun, but it may create conditions that are more sustainable in the long run. Saturn is a planet of austerity. And as Venus comes into contact with Saturn, it brings up themes of delayed gratification. Saturn considers how things function over long periods of time. So we may be asked to abstain from something in order to enjoy it later when the conditions are more conducive to enjoyment, engagement, and pleasure. And this is not my favorite thing to do, but there has been research that if you wait and have 2 cookies later, there's better outcomes in the future. I don't know if I buy that. I usually go for the cookie now because I don't trust that somebody's going to give me 2 cookies later. But Saturn says, delayed gratification can have its benefits. And again, we may be asked to practice that and to notice, hey, what are the benefits here? It's also important to keep in mind that because of the rude awakening of Venus conjunct Saturn after the rose-colored glasses of Venus's contact with Neptune, it can feel kind of like a harsh letdown. And just remember that nothing is fucked, dude. We're just being asked to take a more practical and reality-based approach to what we desire and to create the conditions for more sustainable enjoyment instead of just running headlong into a mirage or into a windmill. So Saturn can help us to develop the structure and container to hold whatever vision we were given access to through Venus's conjunction with Neptune. And if what emerged during that transit was just an illusion, then the reality check that Saturn brings can help us to dispel that fantasy and to stay grounded in what's actually happening. But it's important not to get too bummed out if we're brought back down to Earth through the Saturnian reality check. If you end up feeling alone and lonely on Sunday, don't let it grind you down. These feelings can be difficult, but it's passing. I'm pretty sure. the perceived sense of isolation probably won't last forever. And it may be the price you pay for not getting lost in a fantasy which was unsustainable or even downright deceptive. So there can be a desire to grab onto what feels like it's slipping through your fingers. And this is a very Neptunian quality. Neptune is dissolving. So, things feel like they are, slipping away and we want to grab onto them. But that needing to grab onto something that is not sustainable can create anxiety if we are trying to hold on to what cannot be held, sort of like waking up for a dream and trying to cling to it, even as it turns to vapor in the morning light. So we may experience the highs of fantasies and the lows of loss, as well as the depression that follows in its wake, which is kind of created by the feeling of not getting what we think we wanted and the story that then we create that follows that narrative arc. Oh, I never get what I want. It's not fair. Life isn't fair. I'm going to be alone forever. However, with both of these transits, see if we can stay open to what lessons they might offer us without making any big commitments or sweeping declarations or maybe or major life changes. Instead, we want to consider that what we might get, we want to consider what we might gain from this experience is a vision of an ideal that we would like to move towards and some insight into the work required to make that vision a sustainable reality. Oh, and this brings us to the last transit of the week. I apologize. So Sunday, March 8th, we have Mercury retrograde in Pisces, trine Jupiter retrograde in Cancer, and this is occurring at 15 degrees and 5 arc minutes of these water signs. So during this supportive trine, both Mercury and Jupiter are retrograde. Mercury is in their fall in Pisces. However, Jupiter is in their exaltation in Cancer, and they happen to be the ruler of Pisces. And so during this harmonious aspect, Jupiter provides some resources to Mercury, who's kind of struggling in their fall and moving retrograde. The trine from Jupiter can help kind of stabilize Mercury, which can which can help prevent our thoughts from spiraling out. So Mercury deals with the ways we gather, process, and communicate information. And Jupiter helps to integrate that information into a larger context. It provides us with an expanded view that helps us to make sense of what's going on in our moment to moment, day to day experience. Mercury is sort of like the internal narration of what we were doing. I'm going to the refrigerator. I'm getting out some milk. I'm making some coffee. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing next. But Jupiter is the larger mythology that we are creating through ourselves through the arc of our experience. Oh, like this is how that me making coffee has kind of integrated itself into my life, and I see the story arc of my life based on the symbol of coffee. That's what Jupiter brings to the table. Jupiter says, this is how this all fits together into the plot line of my life. And this is how it all makes sense through reflection and bigger picture thinking. Jupiter helps us to step out of the small world of our immediate experience and into the bigger world of meaning making. So this trine is occurring in water signs, Pisces and Cancer, which points to themes of emotions and intuition. The interconnected nature of Pisces may cause Mercury here to be feeling into the collective emotions and ambient anxiety of the world, which can straight up feel pretty overwhelming. But Jupiter helps us to expand our capacity to hold all of that information, emotional information that we are experiencing right now. And as a planet of coherence and stability, Jupiter's trine can help us to sort of sort out what is ours to hold and what is the external emotional information, which might not be ours to process. This understanding can be really helpful in assisting us in returning to a place of alignment and stability instead of kind of getting washed away in the overwhelm of everything that is going on at this moment. And Jupiter is a planet of faith. And while Mercury tries to figure everything out using logic and mental processes, Jupiter reminds us that that's not how things actually get done. Sometimes we need to have faith in our intuitive wisdom, which oftentimes provides valuable information as to how to proceed and what path to take. The supportive trine from Jupiter helps us to integrate our thinking mind with the deeper wisdom of our intuitive knowing, which can help us when we are spinning out and trying to solve unsolvable problems. So there is a degree of surrender that is available to us during this process. And we can take a step back and recognize what is straight up unsolvable and allow ourselves to let go of the ruminating. Jupiter reminds us that every mind state is workable, and sometimes that just requires a little bit of letting go. And the practice of trusting the intuitive parts of ourselves, which might have a better sense of what's actually going on and how to proceed skillfully. And with that, my friends, that is all the astro weather that is fit to print. And what is up, Katya? Nice to see you, my wizard homie. Not going to get us. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, my name is Joan Emerson Bell. I'm a tarot reader, astrologer, mental health counselor. I do this every Monday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time to bring you all the astro weather to help you navigate your week with some style and some grace. Oh, before I sign off, I just want to bring in one more thing. Just touching back in on this war that just kicked off with Iran. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago when we had the Neptune Saturn conjunction, but what is kind of unfolding now in the news harkens back to two Neptune Saturn conjunctions ago, 1953, 1954, when the CIA and MI6 overthrew the democratically elected leader of Iran. They staged a coup and facilitated a regime change, which led to the Shah coming to power and creating a very repressive government, which then gave way in the 70s to the Iranian Revolution and the Islamic State of Iran and the Ayatollah coming to power as the supreme leader. And I don't know, it's just interesting to watch history repeating itself as the US over the weekend staged a attack and is pushing for regime change. And, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Astrology works in a cycle, and it's interesting, frightening, and somewhat frustrating to watch these cycles play out again and again. And my hope is that we can do things differently this time because it didn't work so well last time. And so I just wanted to mention that because that's one of those, damn, astrology really does work type of things. And again, I hope that knowing what we know, we can make different choices this time and create a better future so that we are not just locked in the cycle of samsara the same way. Anywho, that's all I've got. I hope you all have a great week in space. Thanks so much for tuning in. And until next time, my friends, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and as always, may the force be with you. All right, bye now.